Theta. No doubt, Amelia would endeavor to make it happen. And though he couldn't say for sure, at least half of the other royal selection candidates must also strive for such a world. After all, no person's value should be determined by their race. This idea, which comes so naturally to Subaru, would certainly be accepted far and wide one day. Theta, it's only a dream. But it certainly is pleasant to the ears. Subaru, yeah. So, does that mean I've got your heart fluttering? Theta, flirting with an old hag like myself, what a sinful man you are, Subo. Holding back the chuckles in the back of her throat, Theta's youthful features instantly took on an elderly hue. Then, watching Subaru's tongue-in-cheek shrug, Theta's expression brightened once more. Theta, seeing how much I want to be duped by those pleasant words, I guess I'm really getting old. Subaru, or maybe it's just the little girl inside you falling for my dangerous charms. Theta, PFF. Subaru, that's the first time I got scoffed off by a Louis. Oh. Flinging his hands into the air, and then down again, Subaru slumped in defeat. Theta only shook her head at Subaru's strange behavior, and set her empty cup on the table. Then, looking up at the crisscrossed silver shields on the wall. Theta, a time when the world outside this sanctuary also becomes a sanctuary, huh? Subaru, that time will come. And when it does, it'll be a shame if you're still holed up in here. There's nothing more fun than flipping the middle finger at all the assholes who told you won't make it, after all. True worth comes from overcoming something that no one else thought you could. That's what all challenges and battles are. Because the most magnificent struggle is one chasing after an impossible dream. Theta, alright, Subo. I'll go along with you and Amelia-sama's dreams. Subaru, Theta-san. Theta, I've already decided from the start. If you're the first one to reach me, I'll tell you the story and leave the decision to you. Now that you've heard the story, I see you still want to liberate the sanctuary. And you even managed to laugh off my concerns. Subaru, I don't think I can muster enough bravado to actually laugh it off though. Theta, even so, that's fine. That's fine. As if letting go of some heavy burden, Theta nodded several times to Subaru's answer. From her reaction, Subaru could sense that she had finally reached out her hand from the prison of those memories which, in all those years, she had no one to share with. Whether or not to take that hand and bring her to the outside world was the decision she had left to him. Subaru, so now, there's no longer any Louis-sans opposed to liberating the sanctuary, right? Theta, right, but this won't mean anything until the sanctuary's barrier is released. It is still up to Amelia-sama to pass the trials, that much hasn't changed. Just when Subaru gave himself a relieved pat on the chest for eliminating one outstanding issue, Theta pulled him back to reality. Hearing this, Subaru's relaxed cheeks tensed once more. It was certainly a relief that he found Theta. But the fact that many more problems remain unresolved hadn't changed. He managed to find Theta before Garfield could. But Amelia is still missing, even now. Theta, you're confident in Amelia-sama's chances of overcoming the trial, then? Subaru, I've tried all sorts of things to encourage her. Or, hoped would encourage her. But the medicine might have been too strong, and now I'm having a bit of trouble tracking her down. We're hoping for a quick solution. Theta, why you don't know where she is? Why you sure this is going to work? After everything I've just told you about my past, you realize if Amelia bungles this, all of my resolve is going to waste. Subaru, you're totally right to be worried, so I can't exactly complain, but... Well, after hearing your story, I thought of something. Louise Meyer sacrificed her life in order to protect the sanctuary. The way she placed others before herself to the very, very end was a lot like that girl who always prioritized others to her own detriment. Even if her heart was being withered by endless anguish and mounting hardships, Subaru would not believe for a second that that girl would lose sight of her responsibility and of the hopes placed in her. Subaru, I think I might know where she is. Theta. Subaru, and even if that's not it, we'll turn this little sanctuary upside down to find her. Even now, my buddy must be half in tears looking all over the place. And if that still isn't enough to find her, then that just leaves the one place we couldn't look. Seeing Subaru's conviction, the slightly panicked Theta relinquished a long sigh. Without asking for further confirmation, she only continued with, in that case. Theta, if you're saying you can find Amelia and have her pass the trial, then Garbo would be the last hurdle. Subaru, just from the fragments I heard from Sigma-san, his past was about his parting with his mother. You were also in the tomb at the time, do you know anything about that? Theta, it's only to be expected. That child is extremely averse to talking about his family. Maybe part of it is because he's worried how I'd feel. And he's had a hard time dealing with what happened with Frederica. Frederica and Garfield's parting became final when he swiped away her hand as she left for the outside world. As for why Garfield stayed behind in the sanctuary, perhaps it was to protect the residents who couldn't leave, unlike his quarter-blood sister and himself, from the potential threats that might endanger them. And then, consistent with Ekidona's hint about Garfield's fear of the outside world, there was Subaru, the trauma of his parting with his mother. Huh. He must hate the outside world. I was really kinda hoping he'd be able to help me out with a few things outside though. Theta, Subo and Garbo fighting side by side. That does sound nice. When she thinks of Garfield, Theta's smiling visage would lose all of its youthful impression, but simply overflow with maternal compassion for her grandson. Perhaps, for the four of them playing the same role of Luas, even if it resided within each of them separately, the emotion of familial love for Garfield certainly existed. And surely, Garfield felt the same towards them. Subaru, well, first I'll need to find Amelia. He must continue to prepare for the worst case in regards to Garfield. Now that he had sealed the contract with Roswell, with this being one of the victory conditions of the bet, his final confrontation with Garfield was inevitable. And the same went for Amelia breaking through the trials, which Roswell had deemed impossible, but aside from providing encouragements, Subaru would have to let her overcome that on her own. When she lost her bond with Puck, Amelia had lost the supporting beam of her heart. And in exchange, the seal on her inadmissible memories preventing her from truly facing the first trial was removed. Or at least it should be, if everything was going according to Puck's plan. Once she accepts this fact and faces the trial once more, she should be presented with a different scene. Would Amelia still be able to give the same answer when that happens? Even though Natsuki Subaru could not be there with her in that moment, he had made it his duty to do everything in his power to make sure she does when the time comes. Subaru, I know you probably want to give Garfield a hug right now, but could you stay here for a bit, Theta-san? Since that guy doesn't want to come close to this place, we can keep him distracted for a little longer. Theta, and while Garbo's attention is elsewhere, you'll be up to some clever mischief, I assume? Subaru, why does everyone wanna refer to what I'm doing as mischief and nefarious plotting? Do you guys really see me as that kind of conniving scoundrel? Seeing Subaru tilt his head, Theta didn't give an answer. Slightly irritated by her silence, Subaru sighed and scratched his head. Subaru, so, am I still right to think that today's the decisive day and tomorrow's an extra? If Amelia's where I think she is, all that's left to deal with is Garfield and Roswell. Those two would be the final bottlenecks to achieving the sanctuary's victory conditions. He and Otto had carefully planned to keep those two out of the way. But now, everything will depend on their timing, preparations, and how well they've done their job. The more leeway in terms of timing and prep time they have, the better their chances will be. That much was obvious. Subaru, whether we're laughing or crying, we have to settle everything by the day after tomorrow. We can't mess up at the critical moment, right, Theta-san? Theta, even if you look at me for agreement, what do you want me to say? When a man's resolve is all over his face, all that's left is to go for it. I'll be waiting with great expectations. Without sharing in Subaru's enthusiasm, Theta affirmed his intentions all the same. The awkward smile on her face might very well have been something which often adorned Louis Meyer's face. Surely, that expression was one Beatrice knew well. He would persuade Garfield, support Emilia, and fetch Beatrice. There was still much to be done, and many more obstacles to stand in his way. Storm clouds were gathering overhead, with no easy answer to clear them all away. Nevertheless, Subaru's heart was strangely optimistic. That's because the things he needed to do were the same as the things he wanted to do. No matter how difficult it would be to surmount the towering obstacles before his eyes, it was infinitely better than the time he'd spent utterly lost as to what to do. At last, Subaru was ready to reach out towards that intangible thing named fate. He pulled on his own cheeks, letting go with a snap as he pumped himself up. Giving the wide-eyed Theta a smile and a little wave, Subaru headed for the building's exit. Then, with his hand on the door, he glanced back as if suddenly remembering something and... Subaru, actually, Louis Meyer talked in a way that's pretty normal for her age, so how come the replica Louisans all talk like grannies? Is that like an acquired trait? Theta, what are you talking about? Don't I talk in a way that's completely normal for my age? With an indignant snort, Theta placed her hands on her hips and puffed out her flat chest. But calling that a gesture suited for her age would surely be impossible. Picturing the other girl in a dress who had passed the ages without the slightest growth in her body, Subaru left the building, bathed in the wind. Holding on to that somewhat uplifting feeling, he turned to his final challenge. Natsuki Subaru's fight to end the sanctuary, and to birth it anew, had begun.